Evening all, how we all doing? Oh, I don't know, CSI? Might be able to slip a few bins in somewhere. I see AJ was quick off the mark again. Like literally commenting within a second of me just pressing the live button. Madness. This is big me. Although slowly getting smaller big me. I'm down to 105.9 kilograms now, so the weight loss journey is heading in the right direction. Right, so what are we doing? Caravella, yes. So we will do some more infrastructure work. Let me just minimize that. And let's open up the right level. That's one of the panels I was fixing for the Magellan. For some reason I'd exported this panel and I completely forgot to finish it off. I can't remember who raised that as a bug now, but yes, thank you, and it's now been fixed. Yeah, more buckets. So if you recall last week, we were working on all of the pipe work in a rough sense, just to get some idea of what's needed in terms of individual feeds and where those feeds need to run in order to supply the hardware that needs it. So we've got the RCS, tanks, pumps and chillers and cables and everything on this side and the other side. So that's pretty much done, I would say. Obviously we need to go back and model it all properly, but conceptually that's done. We need to continue some of the work we were doing on here. Oh wow, Sophie! Well, I'm kind of blown away by that. That's mad, thank you. Wow. Yeah. I'm speechless. Thank you. Means a lot. Honestly, means a lot. Oh, I'm all of a flutter now. Yes, so we need to do the feeds and everything for the reactor, and then we need to do the electrical side of the reactor. We need to do the main breakers for the reactor, the high voltage bus breakers. So we need to fit them in somewhere. We're okay for battery rooms because they're going to be up here, and we can squeeze in little breaker boxes wherever they need to be. All of the cabling itself is going to go up and down the stairwell and then through the walls. That shouldn't be too much of an issue. For the most part, we're just running it from the battery room, just laterally along the ship. Might bring some of it out into this kind of a maintenance tunnel down the side. Like some of the cabling for the front of the ship. If we were to run that down this maintenance tunnel, then at least we've got like more in the way of interesting stuff rather than just bare framework, which could look a lot nicer. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it really. So those were the high voltage feeds going to the engines and FTL anyway. So we'll probably do... do we want separate feeds though? That's the question. Yeah, perhaps we'll do 2 separate feeds. Because we could break out in the engine pod for the FTL ring, but I think we'll probably give that a separate feed. So if we make these big chunky ones, the FTL ones, we'll put a smaller one alongside them, and then do a junction box for each of the 6 engines. What else? Yeah, so things like plumbing would be on the deck above, all the HVAC systems are on the deck above. Yeah, so really we need to start splitting the ship up logically. Now on the Magellan, we're doing it in a quadrant-based way because the ship's kind of largely round. But with this one being a long, thin ship, it's probably easier just to treat each deck as its own electrical grid and then have just breakouts for each room. So if we assume one of these to be our breaker box, so this is going to be the same general structure as the Magellan, just on a much smaller scale. Although in many ways it's actually more difficult on this ship because we don't just have nice simple concentric rings to work with. We have more of a less linear layout. Yeah, no, I take being late to whole new levels. Although I did manage to squeeze eating, showering and getting ready within about 40 minutes. So that wasn't too bad. I've been trying to get into a routine on stream days where I start cooking food at 6 and then go for a shower at 7, and then I should be kind of all done and ready and on time for 8. Doesn't always work out that way, but I am making an effort. We've already started with piping, so these green and purple pipes here, these are fuel and coolant pipes for the RCS and their associated storage tanks. So we have begun when it comes to those. And then under the floor here you've got a similar thing where you've got tanks and the associated pipes. So each one of these is a genuine pipe that's actually doing something. We just need to sort out the other end of it for the fuel scoop hardware. The actual room plumbing systems will be a separate layer altogether. I don't know how in depth we'll go with that. So we have a choice with that really. It's like, do we go like full sim and have literal water feeds going to the rooms with, you know, things like taps and toilets that stop working if the plumbing is broken? Or do we just assume that to be working based on the source hardware working? It's like if the main water pump is down, then none of the taps work. It's, you know, it's just how in depth do we want to go with it. You know, when it comes to electrical cabling and fuel and coolant, obviously those are a lot more integral and a lot more important to the ship, things that you really need to care about. But how much do you really care about like plumbing for a toilet? Is that going too far? You know, is that one layer of simulation too deep? yeah, I think for room plumbing, we may have to limit how deep we go with it, but we'll see. That'll be one of those things where I just have a mad day and just do it. Yeah, I mean, at the very least, there would be a master water pump for the water supply on the ship. And if that master water pump were to fail for some reason, then the ship would be without, potable water. So that's the minimum that we'd do. Yeah, absolutely. We also can't simulate flooding. It probably makes more sense to have the main breakers in this room, because otherwise, what are we doing in this room? I mean, we've got the reactor, obviously, and the access gantries to the reactor components so that we can work on them. But, do we actually have anything else to put in the room? And then we could actually put another door here. Or here even. I'm just thinking if we were to make this the chief engineer's office maybe here. And then just have that as a general room for engineering. Let's give that a try real quick. Yeah, so unlike the Magellan, there won't be a secondary bridge on this ship. It's too small to have that much redundancy. I mean, we definitely need all of the main functions of the ship's systems to be controllable from engineering, but you're not going to be able to scan and navigate, just control the actual hardware. So if we were to make that there, the engineering office, he's got a nice window overlooking the reactor room. then we can have a door here that just goes all the way through. Then we could have the main breakers along this wall, perhaps. And this is over 2 floors as well. Actually, let's hop on the floor above. Yeah, so we've got this much room to play with. Yeah, I'm sure we can add some limited control. It just, you know, in order to fit in all the ship systems for actually properly navigating the ship through space, there's just not enough room for any of that around engineering. But we'll see, because, you know, there's the size of a person, so it's quite a big room in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, to be honest, it's no different than the Magellan. Like, the main breaker board is in the reactor room on the Magellan as well. But then it's just a fusion reactor. They don't tend to do anything particularly damaging. Which does mean, though, that the feed we have coming out from here, which is the very high voltage feed, you know, what we could do is do a bit of a departure from the Magellan, and rather than having all of the power going through one main breaker board, including the high voltage stuff, we could maybe just have this as the domestic circuits. So all the various deck breakers and distribution boxes, and then have the high voltage stuff managed somewhere else. To be honest, we could have breakers for the engines just inside of the support pylons, so we can cut off the electricity before it goes up there. That would be easy enough. Hey Lapis, we're working out where to put the main breakers for the electricity supply, and also how to distribute those, because we could just put them all in the reactor room, but it would be interesting to spread them around a bit. These are the batteries here, AJ. They can actually go quite a bit further back than this. We have extended the ship since we made these, but that's kind of the contour of the hull there. So we have kind of that much room for the main batteries. So all the main batteries are going to be held in this section. So I mean, it would be nice to have them housed somewhere else, but we are kind of limited for space. I mean, we're already struggling to fit rooms in as it is, and without making the ship physically bigger, yeah, it would be difficult. So, I mean, there's nothing going on back here. It's just above the shuttle bay, basically. So it has good access from the engineering stairwell. So it is as good a place as any. Yes, MDTA. There will be a Work B type vehicle. I'm kind of picturing it like a little JCB thing, almost like the heavy lifter thing in Aliens, like the big walker thing. The power loader, I think they're called, like a power loader, just without legs and the ability to fly around. So it'll probably be like a JCB shell with grabby arms and thrusters, something like that. And there'll just be a bay for it over to one side somewhere on this particular ship, because as you can see, the shuttle bay is limited in size, so everything's going to have to be rather crammed in. Yeah, that's kind of where we're going with it, Timmy. So unlike the Magellan, we don't have different battery rooms for different quadrants. Because on the Magellan, you've got a lot of isolation and redundancy. On this ship, you've just got a battery room. So the feeds are not going to be quite as involved. So we'll have, so basically you've got an input breaker and an output breaker here. So you've got power coming into the batteries and then power coming back out. Now I think the door, we're kind of limited as to where the door can go because of the stairs, and we're going to have to make a bit of an alcovey job there to fit those in. Not sure how that's going to affect the door. Actually, you might need to make the door a little bit thinner. So basically, up the entire stack, we do need to make a bit of extra room to fit the full 2 meter wide staircase in. Is that 2 meters? Yes, it is. I mean, we could maybe go down to 1.5, which takes it right up against the wall. But I was kind of hoping for a bit of fresh air around it. I think all the walkways are 2 meters, and I think that was 2 meters to there. Oh, see, that's only 180 to there. Yeah, same on that side. So yeah, so we can maybe just make the stairs less wide. I mean, 2 meters for a stair width is quite, you know, that is quite a wide stair. Let's have a look. Are all these? They're all, oh, they are connected. Good, good, good. So if I take in 10 from there, 10 from there, that gives us a total step width of 1.6 meters. So then we can probably take off another 5 each side. if we do that, then we're not having to lose any wall space on here. Yeah, it's definitely a very pokey space. Although we can perhaps fudge this gangway slightly and make that less wide, because again this is 2 meters wide. It doesn't necessarily need to be. Anyway, so I think we can make we can squeeze that in. That'll be fine. And then we need, I guess if there's no, are there any doors on this side? I don't think there are across any deck. No, so in the absence of any doors here, we could always make this corner maybe our utility run. So that can be less wide if it needs to be. Yeah, well, very soon we'll be able to start actually putting in the pipework for this properly and the cabling properly, and start firing up its reactor, which will be good. Right, let's start actually adding some cables and see what we can do. These ones are a bit bigger than they need to be necessarily. How big are these? 10. Yeah, so I think I was using 10 centimeter heavily insulated cables for the high voltage stuff, and then smaller ones for the less high voltage stuff. I suppose we need maybe a couple of different colors for different voltages maybe. What do we have in our color palette? Right, let's make the highest of high voltage that color. Sure, I can hear a second source of music from somewhere. Hang on, let me just pause that one a sec. I can definitely hear something from somewhere. It might be outside. As long as you guys can't hear two sets of music on top of each other. Yeah, this colorization is just for the CAD, just so I know what I'm looking at, so I don't get confused, because I do get easily confused. Right, so that's the very, very high voltage. And then we've got, I think we were using 240 volts for the battery charging Although I think we need to step that up maybe. Maybe to a kilovolt, because there's a lot of batteries to charge. But the actual electrical circuit on the ship is 240 volts. For no other reason than that's what we use here in the UK, and it's just a figure I'm used to. But we might change that depending on what all the loads and balances look like in the final version, because like with the Magellan, we don't have all of the electrical hardware all running and drawing yet on the system, so we don't know how we're looking with the voltages and whether or not 240 volts is too much. I mean, it might just be too much. We don't want to overkill it, but then it might not be enough, because we might have very high amperage in some links because there's not enough voltage there. But we shall have all of that be tweaked over time. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think the US used 240. Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing with it. So we're treating all the lights and the doors and all the domestic stuff as just a simple 240 volt domestic circuit. And then obviously the high voltage systems are on separate links. So we're stepping down voltage as we go. So there will be a breaker. Well, actually, let's do that. Let's add that box in. Borrow this one. So if we were having them in here, then we would need one per deck. And these would be, they wouldn't be high voltage, but they'd be higher voltage. So we'd have one of those per deck. And to be honest, this battery room is big enough that we could potentially have per deck battery arrays. And that's entirely doable. As long as we've got enough room to get around them and do maintenance and everything. And because we could do something like this. And these guys are 240, so let's make them a weird salmon colour. Yes, we do want remote access to breakers. So there'll be an engineering terminal in the main engineering room, and that'll be probably in here. So if we've got the chief engineer's office here, and to be honest, we might not need to use this entire space for that, but we just need a desk and a chair and just a sofa or something, just somewhere where they can, discuss things. We might not even need to split the room up. They could just have a desk in the corner somewhere. And then we'll have an engineering control panel where you can connect to remote breakers and issue commands to them. Ultimately, we want almost like a telnet interface or something like a Cisco router interface where you can actually type in console commands to connect to devices and issue like shut and unshut commands on different interfaces, so you can remotely control different breakers and things. So it'd be nice to have just an overall master terminal that lists all the breakers and all of their conditions so that you can switch them remotely, and then just have it that if any of them break or blow, then you need to physically go and reset the box. Because, you know, we do want people to physically interact with the box, but not necessarily all of the time. So if we run here, we'll do voltage in down the front end, or yeah, down the front maybe. Well, saying that, maybe we'll do it the other way around. So if we have this one as the higher voltage one, so that was one, wasn't it? Do I find myself more productive on stream? Yes and no. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, really. I find that I tend to get less distracted when I'm on stream. Like if I'm just kind of lazing in my chair working on stuff, you know, I might see an interesting YouTube video pop up that I want to watch, or you know, the kids might come in and ask me a question, or you know, I get distractions and disturbances just generally during the course of the day. When I'm on stream, everyone knows that, you know, I'm on stream and I'm not to be disturbed. So I don't get as many distractions, but at the same time, it's much harder to think about things on stream. So, you know, if I need to work out some math or something, then you know, there's no way I'm doing that on stream. Because it's difficult to talk to people and answer questions and try and be entertaining. Not that I think this is entertaining in any great way, but you know, trying to be an entertainer whilst working, you obviously lose a little bit of cognitive power. There's actually a subreddit called Starship Porn, which I am a member of. And also cable porn, because that's also good as well. And for anyone unfamiliar with those terms, it's not what you think it is. It's funny, I noticed a big shift in the Starship Porn subreddit, in that it's kind of gone from people drawing and, you know, designing things themselves in CAD or whatever, and it's turned very much into, you know, look what I've made in No Man's Sky, or look what I've made in Starfield. You know, look at all these kit bash starships. And it's become very much kind of like a kit bashing subreddit, and I guess we just have to join the party with that at some point. Yeah, just search up Starship porn on subreddit. It's all just pictures of starships and people designing new vessels and doing what they think the Enterprise should look like, and stuff like that. It's all fun stuff. Teehee, very droll. Right, so if we run our battery feeds along there, then we'll push one of the cables through the wall for this box, and then we're going to have to run that down there. Yeah, we'll have plenty of labeling and stuff on all the cables and things. All the cables actually have a set ID as well, like a set code, like the wall panels do. So you'll be able to find cables by their address. I think you went wrong there somewhere, Firstus. I feel the need to vindicate myself now. It's this. But this is cool, and you get some really nice ships that people make. Anyone who's into starships and starship design should definitely check out this subreddit. It's really good. I'm just debating whether or not to put this box down here so that we get 4 cables going up the wall rather than 1. It's kind of fitting that as we're talking about starship porn, this particular music starts playing, which is like the cheesiest, most disturbing music in this playlist. I'm going to try it with 4. Yeah, because then we have 4 cables in, 4 cables out, and it won't look quite as empty. Plus, redundancy is a good thing. Yeah, because these hatches here don't necessarily need to be 2 meters wide. They're just literally maintenance hatches, so we can claim a fair bit of wall space here. Although I think we'll probably run the supply feed down the opposite wall. Again, just for some physical isolation, rather than putting all our eggs in one basket over there. Which means that we'd have a similar run down that side, and then these ones are all going to be 240. Yes, every ship will have a cold start. It's yeah, I mean every ship that we build will have full simulation. Like every single bit of hardware will be fully simulated. So cold and dark is just a part of the equation. You turn everything off, the ship is cold and dark. But yes, you'll be able to start the ship in that state. Yes, there will be bars and clubs aboard ships and stations. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll do the same as we've done on the Magellan batteries. Oops. Select the right side. Yeah, so we'll have one input and one output on each array. So that all the cabling is at the back of the room, where it is furthest from the people wandering in and out. Just makes it safer. And then we'll have the control panels at this end for each of the battery arrays. And then each one of these will be isolated. So the main batteries, yeah, so these won't be used for the weapons or any other high voltage system. These will literally just be for powering the decks. So things like the engineering water pumps and all that sort of stuff will be powered by the batteries. Things like weapons, shields, engines, RCS, not the RCS probably, but the FTL will all be direct power feeds. So they'll have their own feed from here, via here somewhere. It's going to be a lot of cables going up over the ceiling. Just realised actually my printer is just stuck on screen. Go away. Has it been there the whole stream? Right, yeah, so power in that side, power out that side, control panels down the middle there. Make sure we can squeeze down the middle of each one, and that should be a fully decent enough battery room. Can I colour these groups? No, of course not. So if they'll go down there, they'll go across through there, which means this, right, so we don't need them. And then this box comes down the other side, probably down this side to be honest. Yeah, things like shore feed on this one. I'll probably do it underneath the same, although, to be honest, the battery room's here, so there's not a lot going on at the back of the ship. We'll have some heat sinks there. Yeah, we'll maybe run some coolant through these and then have visible heat sinks in the hull, which would be quite cool, because I like having the hardware on the inside extend through the hull in some way, so that when you see external hull detail, that's not just meaningless detail, it actually relates to something on the inside. Yes, everything will require tools, and if you, for example, need to replace a component, then you will physically remove the broken component, and then you'll have a broken component in your hands, and you can either just recycle that somewhere or just chuck it down on the floor, and then go 3D print a replacement part, which we will then physically have to carry to where that replacement part needs to go. Right, that's fortunate that we've got a nice uninterrupted wall there, so I don't even know where the bottom of that cable went. There it is. Yeah, so we align that there somewhere. It's quicker if I just delete them and do it again. So we have a breaker box along there somewhere for the battery feeds. So that's basically the main battery distributor there. That rather nicely takes everything up through the main stairwell, through the wall, and that gives us our 4 main battery feeds. And then we'll have the reverse of that here. So we'll have all of the feeds coming out of the batteries back down into here, where we'll have the aggregator. So we'll have that on the other side. May as well borrow them. Not quite as simple on this side because there is a door. Oh yeah, that's our main access on the engineering corridor. So I'll have to go up and over the door. So what the aggregator does is it takes the feed from all the battery. Actually, no, that's a good point. Because the aggregator on the Magellan takes all the different battery arrays for a given room and aggregates them together into a single high voltage feed. But that's not necessarily needed on this ship because we don't have multiple separate arrays for each quadrant. So we don't need an aggregator. We just need individual breakout boxes for each deck. So that's better putting that on each deck, isn't it? Yeah, so in actual fact, we would need one of these boxes on each deck, where we would then take the power for that deck. So up the main stairwell, you'd have, the main power breaker for each deck of the ship. So you'd have just the one cable coming down over the door, I expect, for this one. Yeah, makes the most sense. And when it comes to the electrical ring, we are simplifying that in the sense that both the positive and negative terminals are within the cable. So the whole cable creates the loop, so it doesn't need to loop back round to the battery, because the positive and negative terminals for the battery output both go into the same physical cable. It's just it has multiple cables within it. Right, so let's do this per deck, shall we? So let's get rid of these a minute, because they are no longer relevant. Right, so they're all going to pop through the... Let's just join them up, I suppose. They're going to pop through the wall there. So this one needs to go up and over the door. And for simplicity's sake, we'll have them just pop into the top of the box. Obviously, once we've got all this routed, then we need to start turning it into actual proper cables. Yes, I think when it comes to the bridge and some of the engineering systems, we'll take feeds out from all four of of the battery boxes, and yeah, well, these basically become distributors at this point, because any aggregation would happen here. So let's say rather than one giant battery array, this could be, say, 3, and then we would have a distribution box at the back for all 4 of these, feeding each of the 3 battery arrays, and then you'd have an aggregator for each one as well, probably adjacent to the distributor, where it aggregates all 3 into a single feed, and then these would be the 4 single feeds. They all go into the 4 distributors for each deck, and then those would then have their output feeds for whatever system it needs. So the bridge, for example, could take power from all 4 of those for complete redundancy. Everyone needs to do that regularly, Delta. Right, so I suppose these other ones. So they need to go down this back wall. Yeah, then come across. Do we have a door on every deck? We do. So yeah, so this needs to be duplicated on every deck. Put one there, and there, and there. YouTube seems to have done that crash thing again. I think we're still live. It just it crashed the YouTube window, so I don't know whether that had any effect on the stream. Good, good. It seems to do that every single time we do a stream. Let's get rid of some of these balls that are in the way. Probably should have done that to begin with, really. So that's what we're looking at. So we don't need that box anymore. So we've got the high voltage coming in from, we'll have some kind of, I don't know, some kind of power distributor here at the back of the reactor. So when it hits the diverters, obviously it needs to siphon off energy. So it will just siphon that directly into these various connected cables. We could do box to box. One of the issues is we are, I mean, like these could connect to each other, but we're stepping down voltages as we go, so can't really connect these boxes to that one. But in terms of the electrical circuit, we have a distributor here from the reactor that comes up into each of the battery arrays, so they are being then charged. So they're being charged directly off of the reactor feed. So that's basically the input charge feed. And then the output feed from the battery arrays, which is what's powering the ship, goes into these per deck distributors here. And then these then take off their power to wherever it's needed on a per deck basis. So if you were to shut off one of these, you're shutting off power to the whole deck. Many cats. Yeah, so that's basically the domestic circuit. Now, some rooms, I guess, like the bridge, sick bay, engineering systems, they're going to take their feeds from multiple decks. So we'll have 4 cables, one from each of these going to the bridge. So the bridge will have a distributor in it, and that will have 4 inputs from all 4 of these, which means the bridge is being powered from all the batteries rather than just one array. Yeah, and the weapons don't come from these at all. They'll have their own feeds. Yeah, so like with the Magellan, and the Magellan's going to be a much tougher ship in this regard, simply because of its layout. You'd need to remove every single battery array to lose power on the bridge. And the same will be true here. Obviously it's a smaller ship and you could probably take out all the batteries at once. But yeah, you'd need to kill everything to lose power to the bridge. Yeah, and then we just need to think about physically where those cables actually are going to run. Let's just grab one of these a minute, because we need to make sure we're feeding this box from something logical. Yeah, we'll have a deployable solar array. So, like with the Magellan, if all else fails, then you'll be able to charge the batteries via a solar array. So these batteries can be charged externally, either by shore power or the solar power, and that powers the ship's essential systems. It won't give you weapons or shields or FTL or anything like that, but at least it will keep the lights on and keep the air conditioning running. Right. We'll have something that works by magic here, that's just sending out power. The reactor cap, or whatever we end up calling it. If you mean the bubbling noise, that's actually a shrimp tank on my desk. It's about that big, about that tall, but it's full of lots of cherry shrimp and lemon shrimp and whatever that horrible green looking shrimp is, and snails, and this weird, really quick moving wiggly worm thing that I can't identify. I do, they keep me company during the day. No, it's a freshwater tank. Just freshwater shrimp. It's too small for anything like a fish, although maybe I get a little tiny fish in there, but at the moment it's just shrimp. Yeah. Hang on, I might be able to make something work here. Just need to turn off egg ink. It's one of my addictions, egg ink. Just realised actually that I didn't set myself to do not disturb on Discord. That's luckily no one pinged me. Right, so I've taken a photo, which I've sent to Claire. It's a roundabout way of showing it, but that should work. Well, it would work if my phone didn't suddenly give up. Right, it's not that big of a picture, come on. There we go. There we go. There's my shrimp. So yeah, it's a tiny little tank, but I just have lots of little shrimp friends swimming about. Yeah, I need to lift my monitors up slightly, then I can kind of slide it under more, because it kind of gets in the way. Yeah, each one's about a centimetre long, they're very tiny. funny actually. It has made me think about like shrimp and prawns differently. Like if I go to the supermarket and I see a bunch of like king prawns, like part of me is like, chili king prawns, that sounds like a nice idea. And then the other part of me is going, no, you traitor, you can't eat them. They're your children. Actually, we're going to need probably port and starboard breakers for the weapons. Yeah, so we're going to need multiple feeds on both sides of the reactor room, and then we can funnel them through the wall into the maintenance tunnels. Yeah, true, Delta, very true. It's funny because in the fields around where we live here, at the moment they are like packed with sheep. You know, in the region of probably several thousand sheep per field. Like there's barely room for sheep between the sheep, there's so many of them. And I was just looking at them with my daughter as we were in the car, and I was like, wow, look at all those sheep. And then we kind of went, oh, it's Christmas. Oh no. And then this giant field of sheep suddenly went from something that was kind of amusing to see to like horrifying. The realization set in. I think the most obvious place to route these cables through is either going to be through here, where access is anyway, or maybe through at this end. Because in some ways it would be quite cool to have some of the high voltage cabling like going up through the ceiling here where you can see it, but then we don't really want any of the high voltage important stuff visible or accessible from the main crew areas, because the idea is that, like with the Magellan, you should be able to perform your engineering duties without actually entering any of the civilian parts of the ship. Not again that it matters too much with this ship, because this is such a tiny ship anyway. Everyone's all working for the same corporation. But yeah, just from a health and safety perspective, it's good to keep them limited to the engineering section. The weapons are going to be located around about here. So we'll probably have either like a ball turret on the side, or two, so I have one underneath and one on top, and the same on the other side. So it's only going to have literally just those weapons. There is no room for weapons at the back. I mean, we might be able to squeeze one in behind the behind the RCS thrusters, because we've got this kind of open space here. We could maybe just have a rear facing beam, but yeah, I don't think there's going to be much room for it. So this isn't designed for combat. This is a get in there, exploit what you can, and then get out kind of ship. So the weapons that it will have are purely defensive in nature. It's sort of a hit and run thing. Now we're steering clear of torpedoes because laser point defense is kind of not a big deal in this universe. So anything as slow as a missile is kind of pointless in space. It's all beams and railguns. High velocity, impossible to stop. And yes, this is SketchUp that I'm using to do the CAD work, and then all of the pretty stuff we do in Unreal. Pretty stuff like this, although I've probably chosen the least pretty thing to show. Hang on. Yeah, so all the camera, all the texturing and all the rest of it all happens within Unreal. Don't put the ambient lighting on, that makes it look ugly. But yes, so everything you see here was modelled in SketchUp. In fact, all of it, everything, the entire ship, is all modelled in SketchUp, and then all brought into Unreal and prettied up. I look forward to this ship having that level of detail. Yeah, the galaxy map will be volumetric, and it will actually be the same volumetric effect that we then scale up for the whole galaxy, because one of the big things we want is when you are high enough above the galactic plane, we actually want to be able to see the whole spiral of the galaxy, like stretching out, below you. It's going to be like visually stunning to see that, especially if we also want to fill the night sky beyond the galaxy with lots of tiny little galaxies in the distance. I want intergalactic space to truly feel like intergalactic space, where you can see the galactic halo slightly, and you can see all the dwarf galaxies, and you can see like Andromeda in the distance. We definitely want to include space as we know it to that extent. But then those same volumetric effects we build for that, we'll bring them on board for the holo display as well. So it'll be exactly the same one-to-one. So what you see on the holo display is what the galaxy actually looks like. At the moment we're releasing on Steam. The Epic Store will be probably the next thing we release on. It works on Steam Deck, and obviously Steam Frame's just been announced, and we'll have a look at that as well. I mean, it's working on the Index, the Quest 3 via a link cable, the OG Vive via a link cable. But yeah, so it's not going to run on a VR headset natively, I doubt. Although, caveat of that is that it does run on Steam Deck, so if the Steam Frame is as powerful as the Steam Deck, then it should run natively, maybe. We'll have to see. But things like consoles, we're not even going to think about consoles until we're fully into alpha and the game is in early access. Well, to put it into perspective, this particular ship we're now on part 26, I believe. Yeah, part 26 of the build. And that's 26 times 4 hours. My mental arithmetic is appalling, so I'm just going to use a calculator. So far, we've been at this particular ship for 104 hours. So that's 104 man hours, basically. And I'd say we are approaching halfway done. Obviously, we've done the basic layout. We've done, a bunch of the framework. It still needs a lot of tweaking. And then once we've finalized all the cable routing and everything, then we can have a look at actually fleshing that out with proper graphics. So yeah, halfway through is probably a bit optimistic. Let's say we're about a third of the way through. So maybe about 300 hours for this ship, at a guess. We'll see how accurate I am in 200 hours time. Yeah, we've spoken a lot about the release plans for the game, and we've had a lot of conversations with a few different publishers, a few different business support people, and we've had a lot of meetings with a lot of people over the past few months. And like, one of the main concerns that's been raised with us is the longevity of the studio, and making sure we have a proper revenue stream coming in order to finish the project. Because obviously, we had the Kickstarter money, but that's just like a single chunk of cash, which is it's a pot that's dwindling. So, we need that pot topping up. So we can't take on full-time employees without a regular income coming in. So the early access will be free. So we promised a free release from day one, and we're going to honor that promise. So we will back that up with what we'll probably call like a founders edition or a special edition or something like that. So the Caravella, this is what we're building now, this will be the ship that's given away with the founders edition. So it will have the Caravella, it will have some mission patches and various other just, cosmetic niceties, just to show off the fact that you're not using the free version, you've actually, helped support the studio. And that will be released alongside the free version as part of early access. So we're honouring our promise of making the game free, but for people that actually want to pay and help support the studio, we will package that up with a bunch of extra stuff like this ship and some other bits and pieces. We think that's probably the fairest and most balanced way of doing it. The Founders Edition is probably going to be £25 with a discount. Was it a 20% discount? I think we're doing. Basically, it lowers it to $19.99 during early access, and then when early access is over, we'll just remove the discount, so it goes back up to £25. It's not an excessive amount. I look at the price of some games these days, and I just kind of do a double take. It's kind of mad. And obviously we'll also have ships and things for sale as well to help top that up. Just thinking. So we're going to have a gantry either side of the reactor for maintenance purposes. But there's nothing along these walls per se, so I think rather than coming across a above the door frame like this. I think what I might do is do it across the ceiling and then have it come down the wall. Yeah, exactly. Like what Claire just said, we were going to charge for the Caravella anyway, so it makes sense just to, rather than charging for just the ship on its own, actually bundle it into like a special edition of the game. It just feels more of a thing if we do it like that. Ko-fi backers, depending on the rank, get access to dev builds. So when we're actually like deep in development, we're generally releasing 2 builds per week. And that's probably the kind of cadence we'll stick to. Over the past month, we've had very few builds because we've had such a weird busy month. We haven't had a chance to get anything done. But then, like the last 2 days, I've seen 2 builds. So it's like buses; they all come along at once. So yeah, so all the stuff we're working on now, backers get to have that like immediately, whereas non-backers have to wait for the demo to be updated. And yes, all of the backer ships will be in the free version. Yep, the more support we get, the more we can expand the team and the more we can get done. Simple as that, really. Just looking at the best way of routing all of this. I'm thinking diagonally. Again, we'll have like a power cap on the end of here. So if let's just take a copy of that a minute. Something like that. Yeah, so at the business end of the reactor, we'll have all of the output feeds coming out of it. So they just need to kind of radially route to where they need to go. Obviously, we'll have engine pylons and FTL coming out 45 degrees. We'll have the engine one next to it, and then we'll have a bunch coming out the top there. I guess we'll have input flows underneath for fuel and coolant, and the same that side for exiting that. Yeah, so given what we've got there, I think we'll probably just do some diagonal runs like that, and then we'll bring them all down the wall into whatever boxes they need to go in. Yeah, you don't need to be a backer to come up with stuff. We listen to what anyone suggests, really. Yeah, I think rather than a straight run, we'll angle it. We haven't actually named our shuttles yet. There will be lots of different ones. But yeah, no, we haven't named them. I can't think of any names that we've spoken about. Yeah, that'll do. So shields, they need power too. And they also need hardware. So the shields on the ship will have visible emitters, and the way I'm looking at them is, if you imagine, like if you get a circle of string and put it in soapy water, and then you kind of like run with that circular string covered in soap, you get like a big bubble tube. I'm thinking something like that, where the bubble is attached all the way around its base, where the field emitters are. So we need like a root of shield emitters which form a perfect circle, and then they create the shield bubble where they are. So we'll have probably upper, lower, forward and aft shields, and they'll extend outward around whatever is needed. And then those need to then be powered by capacitor banks, which are what will drain when the shields take an impact. So we're not going to have the shields let through less and less stuff, let through more and more stuff the weaker they get. They're going to remain 100% effective until the capacitors run dry, in which case they just disappear. So essentially you're removing the health of the shield every time they have to expend capacitor charge in like dealing with the impact of a projectile or whatever kind of energy weapon hits them. So every impact drains the capacitors, and then once the capacitors have failed, that's it, your shields are gone. So we need those capacitor banks per shield bubble. So we can have one that goes around the back. So we need to do kind of a ring around there. So that's the aft shield. And then some kind of a ring around the front for the forward shield. Or, which I think I'm more in favor of, maybe, because the ship is so small, maybe we just have upper and lower shields. Because we could put all the shield emitters in like a trench running down the side, which I would quite like. Because otherwise the ship looks quite plain. I don't like the fact that the edge is so perfectly smooth. It needs to be broken up by some kind of visual something or other. So if we were to make shield emitters all the way down the side, then they can feed the upper and lower shield segment. Yeah, not sure how that works with the FTL ring. Might put some shield emitters around the ring as well, so maybe it extends from there around. As with all things, we want the technology to make sense. We don't want to put it like just a magic bit of hardware and go, look, shields, magic. We want them to actually come from something. So as the other thing we need is we need to decide upon our energy density values. So we know that the reactor is 100 watts per second per cubic centimeter of plasma. So that's kind of our power scale for fusion reactors. So obviously the more power we need, the bigger the reactor needs to be, and so on and so on. But what we haven't done is we haven't done that same scale for batteries and things. So that might be an interesting one. Again, all these things help define the size and scale of the ship and like how powerful things like weapons can be. Because if we want like a 5 megawatt beam laser, then we need 5 megawatts of capacitor charge, and then that needs to take up a certain amount of physical space. Now the bridge windows are still there. If we bring up that, this is the proxy mesh, which is why it's kind of low detail. Obviously, once the ship's finished, we'll build the proxy from this mesh and make it look pretty. Okay, so we have engineering space here, we have engineering space here. So that being the case, this is a perfect room to run cables through this wall into the maintenance tunnel. And then we can carry cables up and down here to the weapons, to the RCS thrusters, and to the shield capacitors down the edge. Because we could maybe have the shield capacitors actually embedded behind these pipes and have them run all the way along, because we need to make the ship a little bit wider anyway, so not a lot wider, but if we take this, let's just get rid of that, so go parallel projection a minute. So we need it to come out around about, I think it was 150 to give us the full space we need. So the width of the ship will change by about 1.5 meters on each side to make it wider. So it's not a huge change from the silhouette. Obviously we'll round that off properly. But that extra 1.5 meters means that where we've got all this protrusion here, all that goes away, and most importantly, it goes away in places that are interfering with doors and things. So if we just measure from there, because this is where the problem begins. So that's 1.67 meters. So by extending the ship by 1.5 meters, it means we're actually gaining 1.5 meters here. So this corridor piece would actually be over there. So we're actually gaining like this much space in the maintenance tunnel, which means we've got a lot more room for things like capacitors and anything else we need to squeeze down there. Just fix that before I save it in the wrong place. So it means that some of these maintenance bits here won't be quite as pokey as they are. They'll get wider. Now 1.5 meters might not need to be that much wider, but just having that extra girth gives us a lot of options for routing power, placing capacitor banks, and yeah, all the other stuff that we're really trying to squeeze in without really having space for it. And it then makes, you know, these side sections of the ship a lot more practical in terms of what we can use them for. But yeah, so having the edge of the ship come through like this, originally it was a case of, you know, that's cool, we can have the interior rooms kind of mold to the shape of the hull, and you know that's kind of got a bit of cool factor associated with it, but in practice it just makes things awkward. So you're better off having squared rooms and keep all the angled bits for hardware areas and bits that don't need nice straight wall panels. Yeah, the hardest bits here, because we would have the wall come across like this, essentially in front of the corridor, and there's just no way of getting around that, because this bit here, that's literally the outer hull right there, so it just makes it awkward. We'll still have the surface windows there, so we'll have diagonal windows that are facing down, but they don't need to be there, they can be over here instead, and it just cleans up the whole room and gives us a lot more space to maneuver. But yeah, that's how I'm justifying it to myself. It's amazing how big this ship needs to be to accommodate all of the hardware that's needed just to make it run, let alone all the other rooms and things that are needed. Right, and speaking of hardware, I think what I'll do with these power cables, if we use this as our rotation point. Let's pop that there. So if we're rotating around that central point, then we can radially locate our cables. So the question becomes, how many do we need? So we'd have, I guess, one there for the engines. And have another one on this side for the engines. Doesn't help that it's not using a set number of degrees. Oh, actually, that's not in the middle either, is it? That doesn't help. Right. Let's do it properly. Right, so let's do 33 degrees there. Same there. Right, and then that's the output for the engine nacelle, and then that one. And then we do the same thing on the bottom. Right, so that's the outputs we need for that. And they'll all route up to the engine nacelles as they are there. We'll just have two high-powered cables next to each other. So being that they are direct feeds, yeah, I think the best place for the breakers are going to be here somewhere. So we'll have the high-powered feeds go into a distribution box where we'll have a breaker, so we can isolate. The engine nacelle entirely, if need be. I guess we'd do that if we were performing maintenance on the engine. So if we're replacing engine components or whatever, one of the prerequisites to that is going to be shutting off power to that particular engine pod, and then you can then safely, work on those engines. Right, so the other things we would need, so we need, right, so weapons, port and starboard. So yeah, this cap at the end of the reactor is going to have a lot of feeds bristling out of it, as it will on the Magellan as well. The Magellan doesn't show any of this yet, but yeah, it's going to have that too, and they all need to be routed off to where they need to go. So we've got engines, port and starboard are coming from sorry, weapons port and starboard are coming directly from the reactor. So we'll have we'll have a box there for that, so that they can be isolated. So yeah, so the main breaker for the weapons will be here in the reactor room, and then maybe we'll have a per weapon breaker on this side. That's where are we? So maybe add in a weapons platform just so we can see what we're doing. There will definitely be tech manuals. Yeah, so the tech manual for the Magellan was actually one of our Kickstarter rewards, so we're definitely doing that. But yeah, every ship will have a tech manual, and it will be ridiculously detailed with schematics and diagrams and cutaway diagrams. I'm a huge fan of cutaway diagrams, so there'll be a lot of that. And YouTube's crashed again. Yeah, so the magazine for the railgun will have a 3D printer associated with it in situ. So the idea is for each round you fire, a new round will be 3D printed. So it's kind of automated, but not at the same time, because the actual material bins that contain the resource pellets that the 3D printers use, they're going to need stocking. So you're stocking the materials for the ordnance rather than the ordnance itself. So we'll have maybe like a 10-shot magazine for the railgun, depending on how much room there is. And we'll have a certain time of printing and loading a new slug for the railgun. So I guess you'll get 10 rapid fire shots, and then obviously you've got to wait for each piece to be printed and loaded into the magazine. But we'll see. We'll see how we are for magazine size, and how long it will take to print and load a new slug, and that sort of thing. All of that would be balanced based on performance. Yeah, so the idea would be that the ship by default will fully stock the magazine. So if it's a 10-round magazine, if at any point there's less than 10 rounds, it's always going to be printing more rounds to fill it back up again. So the moment you stop firing the weapon, it's going to be refilling the magazine up until the point you run out of raw materials. But we'll have some kind of storage bin, and we'll have like cylinders that contain basically like granules or pellets or something that's the raw feed for the 3D printers. So it won't be like spools of material like a traditional 3D printer. It'll use pellets, and it'll melt those pellets and turn them into stuff. So the restocking mechanic will be to take these big cylinders of raw materials and basically just insert them into the machine, and then you'll just take out the empty canister and go and refill that at the refinery or wherever else you're refilling it from. Yeah, I think that's not a bad shout, actually. Yeah, keep one in the printer, so there will be a full magazine and one ready to go. To be honest, it's probably got like a loading rail as well. It could probably hold a couple. Yeah, there'll be lots of options with the weapons. So you'll have like automatic, where it just fires continuously. you'll have it so it's just doing single shot. Obviously that's for the railgun. For the beam weapons, there'll be a lot more to tweak and fiddle with. So the combat mechanic is to take down the opponent's shields, because whilst the shields are up, they're essentially invulnerable, and it doesn't matter how much you whack at them with railgun pellets, they're just going to get bounced off the shields. So you need to use the energy weapons to drain those shield capacitors. Once those shields are down, then you switch to railguns and start pummeling the hull directly. And that's basically the tactic for taking stuff down. It's very simplistic, but hopefully it will work. The complexity comes with the energy weapons, because each shield will have a shield frequency, and every time you fire the weapon, you'll be able to change the frequency of the beam. If you match frequencies with the shield, you'll basically be doing critical damage and draining the shields really, really quickly. So it's a kind of game of cat and mouse where we'll make it so that in order to change the shield frequency, you will have to take down the shields and then re-establish them. So the idea would be that every time you go into combat, you would pick a shield frequency and put your shields up. And then the person attacking you, every time they shoot, they're going to be picking different frequencies of the weapon, trying to kind of narrow down what your shield frequency is until they get to the point where they're pretty much matching frequencies. And the closer to the frequency they are, the more damage their weapons will do to the shields. And the same works in reverse. When you're attacking someone with shields, you are constantly switching your weapon frequencies to try and match their shield frequency. And hopefully that will add a lot of kind of dynamic battles where you're kind of constantly like switching frequencies, and there might come a point where it's actually tactically a better option to drop the shields for a few seconds and then re-raise them with a whole new frequency to reduce the amount of incoming damage you're taking. But obviously all of that's just drawing board stuff. We haven't implemented any of that yet, but that's kind of the overall plan. It'll be an entire spectrum of frequencies, so I would say probably thousands. So I guess we'll do it in like gigahertz range or something like that. But yeah, you'll have to get, I'd say, probably within 5 to 10% of the shield frequency in order to like have a noticeable increase in weapon input. If like the further away from the shield frequency you are, the less damage you will be doing. So you'll be able to triangulate the frequency. Like if you randomly change your frequency until you find one which is doing more damage, then if you raise your frequency and the damage goes down, you know that on the next shot you need to be changing the frequency in the other direction. So it's all about kind of triangulation. Yeah, probably. But yeah, and when it comes to the energy weapons, you'll be able to configure the console so it'll do like it will fully charge the capacitors and do one huge hit, or it will like only charge the capacitors to 10% and fire a lot more often. So if you're going up against a particularly tough enemy, you might want to always fully charge the capacitors for each shot. Whereas if you're dealing with several weaker enemies, then 10% capacitor charge is plenty, and you can just pick off lots of smaller ships really quickly. Again, there's going to be a lot of dynamic kind of changing of settings involved. First just guessed my shield frequency. Anything that you are not assigned to as a player will be automated by the NPC crew. That's basically where we're going with it. So if you are, say, an engineer and you're doing engineering tasks, then anything that's not directly related to engineering is nothing to do with you as a player, and the NPC crew will completely deal with that on their own. Exactly, Caesar. Yeah. So through triangulation, so every shot you do will have a damage response. So you'll do a certain number of units of damage, or it will show you. We'll add some kind of way of seeing the effectiveness of your shot, even if, because I want to try and keep it. I don't want to say high level, but I mean more in the sense that we don't want to say, you've done 3% damage to the shields. We want to have it a little bit less specific than that. Like, your shot was weak, or your shot was particularly strong, or I don't know, that sounds a bit cheesy, but we'll find some way of measuring that's not just pure math, because we don't want to just throw numbers at people. We want it to be a bit more meaningful than that. But yes, there will be some way of seeing how effective that shot was, and the closer you are to the shield frequency, the more supportive that message will be. So you can raise or lower your weapon frequencies depending on, are you getting warmer or colder. Perhaps we'll just do that. We'll be like, warmer, oh, colder, oh, you're hot. Something like that. Yeah. We don't want it to be like you just keep pressing the fire button and watch things explode. We want it to be more involved than that, because we don't want it to be jousting in space. We want it to be two giant ships cruising around, like two galleons fighting at sea. We want to be broadsiding one another. That's the kind of combat mechanic we want to see. We don't want, each ship being 10-20 kilometers apart, just a blip in the distance firing long-range weapons. We want the ships to be close together. You want to be able to see down the barrel of your opponent's guns. Yeah, definitely. I think because we've got a defensive station on the bridge, so the defensive station is going to be all about shield management, and I think exactly that, angling the shields towards the opponent is basically how we need to manage that. So the ships need to have quadrants of shield where you can cut power to the quadrant that's opposite your enemy, so that they're literally never going to hit that part. So transfer that capacitor power into the shields that need it the most. So we definitely need the ability to shunt power around between capacitors until there's none left, basically. Yeah, no, true that. We do want to encourage movement. And of course, damage is locational. So, I guess with the skin off, this is a perfectly good example. Where you hit this ship directly impacts what effect your shot has. If all your hits are around here somewhere, you might have just taken out the kitchen, but you've not really done any critical damage to the ship. Whereas if you're shooting at the back here and you're hitting this bit, then you're directly damaging all the battery arrays. So all of a sudden the ship's without power internally. It may still have weapons from the reactor, but all the lights are off. So it's very, very location aware damage, which the way we're going to manage that on alien vessels is each ship's going to have power signatures, and each one of those power signatures is obviously relating to a particular bit of technology aboard the ship. You're not going to know what those power signatures relate to, and we'll base that based on tech level. So if the alien vessel is a higher tech level than you, then these are just unknown power signatures, and you can only guess what they're for. So if you see like a massive energy spike coming from one particular energy signature, you're not going to know like whether they're scanning you or whether they're about to shoot you. So there's that ambiguity, and that's where you have to, like, you know, do you panic and raise shields and fire first, or do you wait and see, are they just scanning you? And I think that will add a lot of interest to alien encounters. If their technology level is lower than you, then you'll have a much greater chance of identifying what that power is. So it'll be like a shield system or an engine system, and then you can, you know, tactically pick which one of those energy signatures you're aiming at. But yeah, I think that will add another depth, you know, to the combat within the game. Yeah, we'll have to see whether there's anything that penetrates shields. I mean, there might be, if you're going up against a particularly high-tech alien with a particularly powerful weapon, they could completely drain your full suite of capacitors, like in a couple of hits, and leave you shieldless and vulnerable. The shields are very physical things, so it's a physical shell around the ship. So I've spoken about this before, but I like the idea of like the Goa'uld personal shields in Stargate, where if you push through it slowly, you'll get through. It's like a non-Newtonian fluid. So the faster and harder something hits the shields, the harder the shields are. So you'd have to squeeze through it slowly in order to actually get something onto the ship. So something like a boarding pod or something might be able to squeeze through the shield. Yeah, we don't have any beaming or teleport technology within the game. That's with our, you know, strict adherence to science where possible. Yeah, beaming and teleporting is just too much of a jump. So we're very much in terms of, you know, physical transport, physical shuttles, and physically moving the player around. MDTA, yeah, so the beam weapons will definitely have diminishing returns on distance. The railguns won't, because you're just firing a slug of tungsten at something. But no, yeah, if your ship is, you know, destroyed and all your critical systems are dying, then pretty much you're screwed. That's a game over scenario. There'll be no towing the ship back. At least in like the first wave of content, this is very much humanity's first foray into the galaxy. Like the Magellan class is humanity's first ever deep space exploration vessel, and even that's an experimental ship. The Caravella, built from technology stolen from the Magellan, is purely out there to exploit resources for a corporation. So again, there's nothing else out there. They're just going out there to see what they can exploit. Humanity hasn't expanded beyond Alpha Centauri, so there is no support network out there. If your ship is crippled beyond repair, then you're literally stuck out there, and the only option is to either hit self-destruct or slowly watch everyone die. Basically, yes. Yeah, so the Magellan's kind of an NX-01 deal. It's yeah, it's the first ship that has an FTL drive that is capable of actually exploring space within realistic timescales. The ships that have gone to Alpha Centauri are much slower, and they've taken like years or months to get there. The Magellan class can get there in a couple of minutes. So it's a huge step up in FTL technology. Hence why it's the first ship that can properly explore deep space. All the other ships would have just taken too long. The Caravella is made for exploration and science, so as much as I say it's out there to exploit resources for a corporation, the class itself is a science platform. So it's going to have science labs up on deck 1 opposite the bridge, and the whole mission profile of this ship is to explore deep space and perform science in order to gain better resources to build better ships for the corporation. They are a shipbuilding corporation, so they want the best resources, the best technology, so they can make the best ships. And the Caravella class is basically their way of being like an early adopter of deep space exploration. So they're getting out there before anyone else, because they stole some of the tech from the Magellan through corporate espionage. But through some backdoor dealings, they have this position where they're out there now, whilst all the other corporations are still playing catch up. So they're getting the first bite of the apple. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why we can't have friendly aliens out there. I mean, I like the idea that you could suddenly decide that that's it. You need to stop, park up, send out a distress signal, and hope someone hears it. And you could have a friendly alien vessel cruise on by and stop and offer assistance. And depending what your problem is, they might be able to help. If you've completely drained your power reserves and there are no stars nearby, they could top your power reserves up and allow you to restart your reactor, or give you some resources to start 3D printing replacement components. There's definitely some things we can do. If we do that, I think we also need there to be sending out a distress signal is going to attract the wrong kind of attention as much as the right. So it might not be someone friendly that turns up, which just makes your bad day even worse. But yeah, we'll look into that. Once we get to that point in development, we'll certainly go through all of that and see what we can do. Obviously, we need to finish all the core systems first before we can get to that sort of thing. Yeah, once we've got actual walking, talking aliens within the game, then the idea we had was to make it so that in order to unlock actually playing as that alien race and having that particular race aboard your ship as a crew member, you need to have made peaceful first contact with their species. And then you'll have to, start a new mission essentially, or recruit someone from that species to serve aboard your vessel. So I was just thinking, if this is the reactor feed coming in, I'm wondering whether we have... Do we have a separate... Because we could just do a high voltage breaker there. So things like the shields and weapons come off the same main reactor feed. But we have multiple outputs on this breaker box. Otherwise we need a separate box for each component. We shall see. But either way, we're going to need at least 2 per side. Yeah, then we can perhaps have them go down from here. So that would be going through the ceiling cavity all the way down to where the weapons are. Yeah, and I think with the RCS, I think we'll have the RCS thrusters be capacitor driven. Obviously they are fusion rockets like the main engines, so well, I say fusion rocket, they're plasma rockets, so they ionize a gas and eject the hot plasma very, very quickly. But you need a lot of energy to do that, so if we just have those just constantly draining on the main batteries, so at least on the main batteries you've got reaction control and basic movement, whereas the much bigger, beefier main engines, they'll take theirs directly from the reactor. Thank you, Project Chimera. Very much appreciated. Yeah, things like big conflicts between species. This is something which will be, at least for the procedural systems, it will be sector based. So the way that the galaxy is constructed is each 100 cubic light years, so each 100 light years along each axis, million cubic light years of space. That is one sector, and we can generate a political state and interactions between different species, and we can configure all of that per sector. So you could have, say, 2 warring factions that exist within that sector of space, and depending on which side you help, the other one will become hostile to you, and within that sector, that's the political situation and that's the position you've put yourself in. Once you leave that sector and go to another sector of space, you'll encounter an entirely different political situation, and they won't know you from anyone else. Obviously, if you return to the original sector, the same condition still applies. So every single sector of space is an isolated political state, which you will have some influence over through your actions. But largely speaking, anything you do is limited to that sector of space, because that's just how the galaxy is generated. So one sector has no knowledge of what's happening in an adjacent sector. There's no logical link between them within the game's code. So it is just isolated cubes of content throughout the whole galaxy. The caveat to that is that the things you do will change kind of like an alignment chart. So if you think about Dungeons and Dragons, where you've got like chaotic neutral or chaotic good or lawful good and that sort of thing, we'll have something similar to that. So if you go around guns blazing and always prefer combat over diplomacy and basically just turn into space thugs, then that alignment, like that background alignment for your vessel, will use that to project your reputation forwards. So even though there's no physical link between sectors, if that's how you're conducting yourself in the galaxy, then alien races, when you meet them, may or may not have heard of you, just on the grapevine. So their reaction towards you will be coloured by, how you have behaved, as a captain, as a ship, throughout your time, exploring the galaxy. If you've been like really good and supportive and helpful, then, people will have heard of you for good reasons, or maybe think that you're an easy mark for that reason. So yeah, the reputation will matter. But again, there's a lot of balance and nuance and depth that we can roll into that, which is kind of exciting. Right, let's try and get some more work done, shall we? We've done a lot of chatting and not a lot of doing. Hey, Stardust, welcome to the stream. I'm stuck in a pipe. Right. Yeah, it's always good to have a think about, how we're doing stuff. Obviously, a lot of this is in flux as well, because as we actually start building game systems, it might turn out that I'm talking nonsense and these ideas I have don't actually work. But in theory, that's the plan. Actually, I'm going to move that down a bit, aren't I? So we would have the power coming up through there into what is already an engineering space. That just means that we're keeping all those cables and things within the engineering section. And if we punch through the wall here, that gives us the power where we need it. Oh yeah, I was going to make a faux weapons platform, wasn't I? Let's grab this a sec. So that would be running behind the weapons like that for crew access. Might have some steps going down there because there'll be some storage tanks for whatever sickbay is using under the floor there, because that's sickbay above. So things like oxygen tanks and stuff will be held under the floor for sickbay. So if we just group that up a sec. Pop that there. Do we have a mirrored side perhaps? Yes we do, so we've got to put it there. Right, which means the space we have for the weapons is essentially there. the midpoint would be there, but I think I prefer it around there. So the weapon would be there. So that is a 2 meter wide base. I imagine probably wouldn't be quite that big, but we'll find out when we actually build it for real. If we just pop that through. Yeah, so that's where the weapon would be, on a turret. And obviously the same above as well. So if we turn on outer bits, so we'd angle them to be in line with the hull. Yeah, so we'd probably have a turret here, a turret underneath, and the same on the other side. So if you're facing something head on, then you can bring all 4 turrets onto it fairly easily. Otherwise, you've just got 2 turrets either side for dealing with things around you. Then we'll have those so that they can shoot up and down, obviously, as well. So they have quite a lot of range of movement. What's particularly nice, actually, with this one is that when you're in the bridge, you'll be able to look out the window and actually see the weapons firing, which is kind of nice. It's always good to see things happening from inside the ship. And you'll see, you'll see the RCS throw there. You will see the RCS firing, and you'll see the weapons firing. And when I add the side windows, you'll also see the engines firing as well. Just for interest's sake, how big that was, a meter, wasn't it? So if we go up, how many sides do I want? Let's go 15. Something like that, only angled over to contour the hull, and maybe not quite so protrudy. And that'll have, like the Magellan, it'll have a dual railgun and beam laser platform. So there'll be a single turret, but with multiple firing modes. And then within here we will have like the capacitors for the beam laser, and then the magazine and 3D printer for the railgun. And there's plenty of room here for all of that, so that'll feed them. Not a lot of room for capacitors, but hopefully once we expand the hull outward slightly, that will solve the room for capacitors issue. The weapons will be automatic but controlled via a UI. So the ship's computer is going to be doing the physical moving of the turrets. What you'll be doing as the player, or the NPC tactical officer, will be painting targets for the turret. So you'll be choosing what is being shot at, you'll be choosing when the weapon fires, and you'll be choosing, what different fire rates there are, or how strong the impact will be, or what weapon frequency will be used. So you'll have control over all the configuration of the weapon. You just won't physically move the turret. The computer will do that bit for you. So it'll just be a case of, you'll bring up a schematic of the enemy vessel, you'll see the heat signatures, you'll pick the heat signature you think is most tactically relevant at the time, target it, and just basically just do weapons free. And then the ship's computer will continually fire at that target until you tell it not to. Probably more like that. Yeah, like that, but better, and with guns. Should we give it some guns? Let's give it some guns. To be honest, rotating that was probably not the best idea, because then I lose the alignment. something like that. It does look a bit darky. No, I'll make them bigger than that because they look a bit pathetic. But the idea being that we've got a beam laser system and a railgun system, all part of the same turret. So it's like a multi-purpose turret. And then you switch modes depending on what you're doing. So again, you use the beam laser to take down shields, and you switch to the railgun to take down the hull and to destroy things, aboard the ship. Let's group that and that up together, and then let's put them in the same group as that, which means they should then appear on the other side. So yeah, something like that, and then all the physical gubbins and hardware will go in and around here. So there'll be a lot of hardware to navigate around in this section, but it can only get easier once we expand that section out slightly and make it a bit wider. Yeah, when it comes to probes, that's an interesting one. I was thinking of having something either in the shuttle bay or above the science labs here, because we've got this kind of flat section across the top of deck 1. And we could have some kind of probe launcher up there where you load the probe in one of the labs and it goes up and out. But we're stuck for room in the labs. There's really not much space. So probably we'll do it from the shuttle bay and have them return to the shuttle bay. That is where we're launching stuff anyway, so it kind of makes sense to do that. The probes are like tiny shuttles anyway, so yeah, we'll just do that, I think. I don't see why not. Project Chimera? Yeah, I think each turret will be individually controllable on the UI. So you could have one turret rapid firing whilst the other one is charging for heavier shots. So you could definitely do that. That kind of brings up the question as to whether or not you would have maybe different turrets targeting different targets. Not sure we're going to go that far with it, but certainly yeah, certainly having independent configuration per turret, because on the UI screen you'd have all 4 turrets, and then you'd have the configuration for those, like charge level per shot, which would be basically like, you know, from 10 to 100%, or even 10 to 110%, where if you're overcharging them, you're doing more damage but damaging the turret, and you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, so you'll have rotation, obviously, you know, along the axis of the ship where it's attached, but they'll also have rotation around the gimbal as well. So they'll be able to point essentially straight up, away from the ship if need be. So your firing arc is, well, pretty much everything there. You know, you'd have the whole lot. Yeah, I guess you'd have basically from there all the way around would be a firing arc, and again to the front. Obviously you're not shooting anything behind you, although, you know, you'll be able to get something that's there. So obviously the FTL ring is going to go around there, so we'll have to have it lock, so you know, it won't gimbal to the point where it can actually shoot the FTL ring, because that would be unfortunate. But yeah, so you'll have limited rearward facing capability, I guess. You know, anything alongside your ship is fully within your firing arc, and of course anything in front of you gets all 4 turrets. So, you know, pointing head on at things is definitely the preference. I mean, we could potentially fit a turret underneath, because the only thing under there really is the cargo hold. So this is all cargo space underneath. So we could maybe shave off some of the cargo at the back, to have a rear-facing turret there. There's definitely room for it, but we'll have to see how we are cargo space-wise. There's precious little cargo space as it is. Yeah, so the probes will be configurable. So they'll be configurable based on what sort of thing they're doing. So, like if you're sending a probe down to an ocean environment, you would have like an aquatic module on it, so that it can take an aquatic sample. If you're sending it to do geology, it would have the geology module fitted. So if you imagine, hang on, let me see if I can find a picture of it. Is it the X-37B? Yeah. Right, so this thing, this is what we're modeling our probes on. So, you know, it's a reasonably small, compact probe that we'll be able to send down to planets or wherever else we need to send one. It'll have the capability of doing atmospheric flight. It'll be able to hover, and then we'll have like this middle section would be something that you can remove, so it'll be modular. So the engine part is the same on every probe. You know, the telemetry and everything is the same on every probe, and the overall chassis underneath. And then this midsection will have different modules that you can replace depending on what you're sending it down to do. And then underneath, it will have like sample collection, grabby arms, or whatever else it needs to do. But yeah, that's kind of what the probe is going to look like, roughly. Yeah, so when it comes to like the shuttle bay, we'll probably have like a probe section over to the side here. So you would either use a probe that you've currently got or 3D print another one, fit the relevant module for what you're going to use the probe for, and then that probe will just fly off out the shuttle bay and it will come back later when it's collected whatever it's collecting. Yeah, so that's pretty much our shuttle idea. Yeah, it's an interesting point, AJ. I think those kind of things will come out in the woodwork naturally as we're building out all the different systems for the ship. You know, and as we start working on probes, then those sorts of things will be the kind of thing that we start, you know, kind of integrating into stuff. Yeah, it's how the probes are actually physically managed is something that we need to deep dive on, because quite rightly you could fire a probe at a planet and then just leave, and then, you know, what happens to the probe? Because the star system is then completely unloaded. So we need to then start tracking, you know, where that probe is and what it's doing, and basically have it in a holding pattern so that when you return to that system, then that probe is there waiting for you. In terms of time, I'm thinking a few minutes. So if we have it so that you have to be within a certain altitude of the surface to launch a probe, otherwise, you know, it's going to take forever to get down and come back. And then we'll have it that, you know, you'll see it like rocket off into the distance, and then essentially it will just disappear, and a few minutes will pass, and then you'll see the thing rocketing back towards you again with whatever it's picked up, and then it will land itself in the shuttle bay. That's basically what we're doing with the probes. So they're not going to be gone for long, and we'll obviously tune that, you know, based on experience as we're actually playtesting. But yeah, sending one off and then immediately leaving the system is probably not very practical because of how quickly they'll come back anyway, because we don't want people sat around 10 minutes waiting for a probe to come back. That just doesn't make for very engaging gameplay, you know, as realistic as it might be. I mean, if we're talking realism, it would probably take a couple of hours for a probe to, you know, come back from a planetary surface. But yeah, I think 5-10 minutes is probably, you know, the time scale we'd be looking at. Good night, CSI. Have a good one. Yeah, when it comes to making things do things they weren't designed to do, again, that's the kind of stuff that we'll do over time as we start building those things, because obviously the probes are modular, so they're going to have this modular payload bay, which means that opens the door to like an infinite variety of things you could put in them, including a bomb or whatever else. So you could send one out as a beacon, you could send one out as a flare. There are many things you could use a probe for. But then I guess you'd then have to pick the mission profile for them as well, because the idea with how the probes get used is they are designed for surface retrieval. That's the whole point of them. So to save the effort of sending humans down to the surface to actually physically explore on foot, you send a probe which is a hell of a lot quicker, a hell of a lot smaller. It will go and retrieve a sample, bring it back to the ship, and then no humans need to be involved in the process. The whole thing's really quick and simple. So from the bridge, you would obviously bring up a 3D holo display of the planetary surface. You would have targets of interest all over that planetary surface. So on the short range sensors, right now, all it's showing is just like the planet and anything that might be next to it. We'll have a surface view as well. So when we bring up the surface map, we'll have like points of interest all over the surface map, which will also be visible on the holo display. And then we'll have a text list of all those surface sites. So it'll be things like geology sites, or like flora location or fauna location, and all the different sites that are offering science will be things that you target. So that when you target that location and you click the launch probe button, it doesn't just immediately launch a probe. What it does is it then sends the message down to the probe bay, or the shuttle bay in the case of the Caravella, and whoever's actually manning the probes will see that appear on their screen, that a probe has been requested for X, Y, and Z location, and that probe needs to be it needs to be an aquatic probe, and it needs to launch to these coordinates. So you would take those details, configure the probe based on what the bridge is asking for, and then send that probe off. On the bridge side of things, what they'll see on their UI is like the probe request will come back as acknowledged. It will be like configuring probe, sending probe, awaiting probe return. So you'd have all those updates on the bridge, which are being triggered by the actions that are taking place in the probe room. If you were playing on your own with no other players and no NPCs, then you would have to hotfoot it down to the probe room, configure a probe, get one sent out, then hotfoot it back to the bridge again. So that's why you need the crew there, doing these jobs. So again, we're not just having things magically occur. Everything has a very physical process associated with it. Yeah, exactly, AJ. To be honest, you're not wrong. Like McDonald's. You get your order number and you wait for your food, and it says on the screen, making order, or serving order, ready for collection, that sort of thing. So we'd have a similar thing, and to be honest, the cooking gameplay is not going to be too dissimilar to that either. So you'll have if you're serving in the kitchen, you'll have an order pop up on the screen. It will say what's needed. You then prepare that order, mark it as ready, and that's essentially the cooking loop. So it's like cooking but with probes. Very similar kind of process. Hopefully she'll be available soon, Don. I think I'll speak to Claire about this, because obviously we haven't discussed exactly what the release options will be with the with the special edition, Founders Edition, whatever we call it in the end. Obviously, we want to have that ready to go day one alongside the early access release. So early access will have the Founders Edition alongside it for people that want to actually buy the game. But we can probably do something in the interim. Like, there's no point buying it now, because as much as we're fleshing it out and adding details, there's nothing really to see and do aboard it yet. So it's not a practical, functional vessel. And as I realized yesterday, if you start a new game on the Caravella, it wipes your old save game for the Magellan. So before we can properly give it to people to fly, we need to make sure that we also have multiple saves available. So when you continue game, you have a list of games to continue. So you could have one mission running on the Magellan, another mission running on the Caravella, and we won't cap that, so you can have as many save games as you want. But we need to do that first, and then make the Caravella available. Otherwise, it's going to mess people's save games up. Oh, list. Yeah, I don't understand why games limit the number of save slots. I'm sure there's some rationale behind it, but I don't understand what that rationale is. I mean, surely the only limit to save game slots should be the amount of hard drive space you have. I mean, surely the developer doesn't care that you are one of those people that likes to make 100 different save games with slight variations on each one, or you want one save game where you've gone off one path and another save game where you've tried a different path. I mean, I can't think of a practical reason why you'd need to limit that. So we certainly won't be, until something forces us to. Yeah, I guess I can appreciate it on a physical console, that a physical cartridge that you slot in. Sure, you'd need to manage space on that, but yeah, on a PC game, why would you limit it? Hey, Ludbud. Long time no see. Now, the Caravella is a new class of ship which is going alongside the Magellan, and will be part of our Founders Edition release. So the Magellan is still ticking along quite nicely. In fact, here it is. Here is the Magellan. No, not that you can see because it's nighttime, but yes, the Magellan is still here. She's not going anywhere. Yeah, the Caravella's a new one. So, actually, for anyone that's not aware, we're doing 3 streams a week now. So today, the Sunday stream is all about the Caravella. So we spend 4 hours working on the Caravella. On Wednesdays, we work on the Magellan. So we just do something on the interior of the Magellan to try and progress it a little bit. And on Fridays, it's just random Friday. So we'll do whatever tickles my fancy at the time. Various times during the day, I'll think to myself, oh, I really wish I was working on planets right now. So the Friday stream kind of allow me to explore the things that I really fancy working on, to try and keep the passion rolling. If that makes sense. But yeah, that's our streaming cadence. Scale-wise, it's quite funny. Hang on. Let me turn my ambient light back on. Oh, not that much. Yeah, so Magellan's got some broken bits at the moment. I don't know why these materials are messed up, but they are. So yes, so if that's the scale of the Magellan, and that's a shuttle down there, the Caravella isn't much bigger than the engine pod. So if we go and find Caravella proxy, it's fairly small in comparison to the Magellan. So yeah, when you see them aside one another, yeah, it's way smaller. So the Magellan is still the big boy. And I will now delete that, otherwise I will save it as part of the level and it will be stuck there like last time. Yeah, I am very tempted to start working on the backer and non-backer star system creation tool. Obviously we can't finish it because we're still missing moons and multi-star systems and that sort of thing. But we can at least do version 1 of it so that you can at least start adding star systems to the game without having to go into game files and start changing database entries. And the way it will work is that all the star systems you create will appear in your local game. I might be able to get it to replicate, but every time I've tried so far it sends too much data over and the packets get dropped. I need to work out what's going on with that, but ideally if you start a multiplayer game, it would be great if it used your local copy of your custom systems, so anyone joining your game can see the custom systems you've created. But I don't know whether we can make that work, but at the very least it will work locally. Oh, for sure, yeah. One of the reasons we actually started working on the Caravella to begin with is because I needed a much smaller vessel to prototype all the systems we were building. So I needed something that loaded quickly, where I can get a handle on how those systems function in order to then build them at scale on the Magellan. Now, obviously, when it comes to the electrical stuff, and the cooling and the fluids and that, we've already got that working on the Magellan, so that's not so much of an issue. But yeah, when it comes to things like weapons and the actual physical engines and that sort of thing, those things are going to require prototyping and testing probably rapidly in and out. So load the game, test something, close the game, tweak it over and over and over, and having to load the Magellan every single time is a bit tedious. So we've made the Caravella to make that process a little bit less painful. And as good as my test map is for just testing galaxy stuff on my little test bridge, it's no good for testing proper game systems like weapons and engines, because it is just essentially a flying bridge. So we need to put plenty of high voltage warnings on these cables, because this is probably going to be like the HVAC room. So a lot of these rooms on this ship are going to be dual purpose because of just how small the ship is. So as the other benefit of the Magellan is it's got much bigger storage tanks, so it can go further. So this ship's probably going to have to stop and refuel more often as well. It will be quicker though. Smaller ship, more nimble, quicker FTL drive. But yeah, we'll have to stop off more often. Right, so if I take that, and that, and that, and them, and we group them up. Right, so if I go into this group, paste them in there, and on this side, I can grab that group and then paste it there, thus copying it across. Systems on the Magellan, that's a good question. So I'm liking the fact that this is starting to turn into like a nervous system diagram. The more we flesh this out with cables and things, the more awesome it's going to look. Yeah, so on the Magellan, so the main engines are not modelled at all, so they need modelling. The RCS thrusters need modelling. The outer areas on D&E decks all need modelling. Right now it's just bare framework. Yeah, and all the pipes and cables and things need modelling properly, because right now they're just floating in space. So unlike this, where we've actually got things running, on the Magellan, all the pipes are just like a meter long and floating, because they're not actually in their proper locations yet. So that needs doing. I also need to run some tests on whether or not to have them as like this cable, this long cable going through here. It's passing through multiple segments of framework. So do we make that multiple cables, or do we make it one long cable, and if it's damaged you replace the whole thing? I'd rather segment everything so that if there's a fault here, then you fix it here, rather than damage affecting the entire cable that you have to replace. But we'll see how that runs on performance, because when an event happens on the system, that message has to travel to each segment, and the more segments you have, the more messages are being transmitted. And on something the size of the Magellan, you're dealing with thousands and thousands of individual cables, which could be a bit of a CPU hog. Yeah, I'm sure we'll make a smuggling ship at some point. Yeah, so when it comes to like redundancies and switching to backups and that sort of thing, like a lot of the cabling is physically rooted and physically in place for a reason. I think any switching over of backups need to happen within a box. Like, I don't know, let's say the starboard breaker box blows for the starboard weapons. So basically the starboard weapons, which are over here, they no longer have power because their associated breaker box is busted. So how would we then get power to those weapons? So I guess the only thing we could do is bypass from the port side, but then we'd need a cross feed somehow so that we can do that. But then you're now running twice the voltage through one breaker. Yeah, there's a lot of complexity there in routing the power and managing the load. So you'd have to build this hardware with twice the load capability in case it needs to run both sides of the ship. So I think, as much as I would love to have mechanics where we can like plug in a cable and then run down a corridor and plug that cable in somewhere else to, you know, get something working, I think we'll manage that logically through the actual equipment, rather than physically running cables. I mean, I love the idea of running around with cables, but I'm not sure how practical that would be with this, simply because of how specific the electrical system is, and how specifically everything is wired. It's difficult to be able to plug things into other things. I guess the obvious one would be, like, if we lose one of these battery arrays, so obviously, you know, we've got one battery array for each deck. If we were to lose, say, deck 2, so that battery array is blown, this breaker box is no longer receiving power, then we can route power from another battery array to continue supplying power to that deck. I think that's something that it would be good to do. But then, you know, then the whole system has to update to incorporate that. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, any electrical link that needs to exist logically, of course, also needs to exist physically. So we could have cables tying these boxes together as backups. We also need to think about emergency power as well, actually, on that note. I might have to stick that. Actually, instead of having a turret down here, I think we might actually need to use this rear section behind the cargo bay for the emergency batteries, because then we can route that to these boxes, so they have an emergency feed just to keep the ship running, and provide enough power to start the reactor, because of course we need the reactor startup capacitors somewhere. Yeah, it's just the practicalities of it. Like, running around with cables is great, and it's possible, because all you do is, you know, you take an origin point and a destination point, draw a spline between the two, and then route the cable along that spline. It's easy to do, but the practicalities are more on the logical side, in that you've now joined these two electrical buses together. You know, are you now just creating a loop? Because you've got messaging, you know, from a simulation perspective. You know, the electrical simulation is sending messages down these cables. If you introduce a loop, then you'll get essentially what's the equivalent of a broadcast storm on a LAN. So you've got these messages that then go into a loop, and it will crash. I'll think on it. I mean, I'm sure there are ways and means around doing that, so that we can get that gameplay of switching to backups. We'll definitely have backup power elsewhere on the ship, and I think this is probably where it will be. But I think that's exactly where it's going to have to be. And then and so all of these boxes will have a secondary input from the backup power, which will then allow the ship to function on backups. And then, like with the Magellan, each one of these boxes will have a switch on it where you switch from mains to backup. So you'd have to go deck by deck, switching either to backup power or not. So there wouldn't be a ship-wide switch to backup power. It would be per deck. Again, that's something we can probably manage from the engineering office. But yeah, I'll think on it. But that's probably, at the very least, how we'll do it. Voyager getting back home to Earth would probably have taken about a week and a half. In fact, we can probably work out. I mean, what was it? It was 75,000 light years. Hang on, let's Google it a minute. Voyager distance to Earth. No, not the real one. Star Trek. 70,000 light years. Yeah, alright, so math time. So 70,000 divided by 300, so that's 233 hours. Divided by a number of days, so yeah, 9.72 days would be how long it would take to get back to Earth at 300 light years per hour. So it's quite a bit quicker than Voyager. Yeah, Star Trek's FTL is stupid slow. Like, stupid slow. Although, saying that 9.5 days, that doesn't take into account having to stop for fuel. That would extend the time quite a bit. That's obviously 9.5 days constant flying, but you wouldn't be able to fly constantly for that period of time. Yeah, there'll be plenty of ways of going over, limit thresholds with everything. So, the weapons are the obvious one. If you charge the weapon capacitors more than they are rated for, then you're going to get stronger hits, but you're going to damage the capacitors and damage the weapons through doing so. So you could maybe get, a couple of hundred high-powered hits out of it, but by the end of it, your capacitors are trashed and your weapons are trashed, and you're going to have to repair and replace components. So, in an emergency, it'll get you through a particularly difficult fight, but you're going to have some downtime afterwards repairing things. But I like that. I like that gameplay option where you can purposefully hurt your ship in order to be more effective for a short period of time, and then just deal with the consequence of having to fix things. Okay, so on a per deck basis then, because we've got breakers going down to there, so we'll need I guess we'd probably split the ship into the forward and aft segments and have circuits running accordingly. So probably have a separate circuit for dealing with the coolant room. So yeah, so unlike the Magellan where we're actually dealing with segments and corridor rings, on this ship it's more rooms. So you'd have a circuit for all of this, for the pumps and the chillers and the coolant pumping and everything, and all the lights and everything. And then we'd have, I guess, a separate one which is just the cargo bay, and probably a charge feed for the batteries. And then maybe a midships cable for this section, and then a forward one for here, or maybe just forward for all of that, to be honest. So we wouldn't need a huge number of circuits coming from here. Yeah, then we'd have junction boxes off of those cables for powering each room. See, this isn't going to get any wider. So when we extend this bit out, this bit underneath won't be affected. It's only this section. So when it comes to routing cables, we're probably going to have to maybe have them go above the window. Yeah, they may have to go up. I mean, the windows need to be a bit smaller anyway, because I made them way too big for this ship. Yeah, so I'll have to route the cables above there. Or actually, no, probably down through the floor, and we'll have floor panels you can lift off to get to the cables. It's probably easier. Yeah, and that will power the lighting and all the farming units and things for this. I have heard of Space Engineers too, yep. It's very impressive. I've dabbled with Space Engineers, and I was really, really impressed by how, I guess, how good the physics and the freedom of action were in that game. You know, the things you can build and the things you could do, and the fact that terrain was moddable, and you know, there's a lot of player agency in Space Engineers, and Space Engineers is probably a game that I would really, really get deeply into if I wasn't so busy. Yes, Michael Douglas, this particular ship will be packaged up with our Founders Edition, which will launch alongside Early Access. Yeah, it's you say it doesn't exist, but LED lighting panels exist and breaker boxes exist, and you know, a lot of the hardware on the ship exists in the real world. You know, even fusion reactors exist. They're not like net energy positive, but they exist and they work. So, you know, nothing that we're building here doesn't already exist in the real world. The electrical simulation is using real electrical engineering. It's math that exists. You know, pumping liquid helium for coolant, that's a real thing. The only things which are like out there sci-fi, I mean, the artificial gravity is just hand waved. You know, we're using a novel mineral that really enhances the mass energy relationship principle. Yeah, it's sci-fi. The FTL drive, as much as it's based on, you know, Alcubierre's work, it's still sci-fi. The beam lasers are sci-fi. The railguns is sci-fi-ish. I mean, railguns do exist in the real world, and they're scary powerful, but they literally eat themselves every time they fire. So, you know, as a technology, they haven't succeeded because they're a real pain in the ass to manage. But, you know, we're obviously hand-waving the pain in the ass bits and just saying, yeah, our railguns don't eat themselves when they fire. But yeah, you know, batteries, capacitors, you know, a lot of what we do is based on real world stuff with some sci-fi on top to make it a game, basically. Oh no offense taken at all. I think it's good to touch on these subjects because you know, one of the things that I like about Star Trek is how Star Trek explores science. Now, they don't explore science properly, not like we are. Like, you know, they run on like electroplasma, where they're literally piping energized plasma around tubes around the ship. You know, it's all future sci-fi tech. We're using copper cables and actual electricity. So, you know, our ships are a lot more grounded in reality than something you'd see in the likes of Star Trek. But that's what I like about it. I like that what we're designing here is believably buildable in the real world. Like, you could probably build a lot of this ship as it stands in the real world and have a bunch of it work just like it does in the game right now with our current level technology. Like, you know, a bunch of battery arrays and a bunch of LED panels in corridors. That's all going to work exactly the same right now. You know, a miniaturized fusion reactor, obviously we're quite a few decades away from something like that. But the rest of it, you know, the chillers are based on a real world design. They're just using magnetic refrigeration. That's a real thing. The fluid pumps are literally just pumps. So yeah, you know, most of this ship you could build. I mean, even the RCS thrusters are just Vasmir rockets, which are, you know, a thing. Obviously, they're weak in comparison to the way we're using them, but still, the technology exists. So yeah, that's what I like about the thought experiment that we're doing. I think I love that practical technology, that practical engineering with that sci-fi mix of artificial gravity and FTL and lasers. Yeah, railguns are an interesting one. I was watching a documentary on them about a month or so ago, and they were talking then about how the issue with railguns, yes, power generation. They use a tremendous amount of power, but just running the thing is difficult. You know, it's as awesome as they are. You know, they do rip themselves apart. I mean, the barrels of railguns do not withstand much in the way of firing, and then you've got to replace the whole barrel. So, you know, if I guess in the game that the way we're doing it, we're having it so that the slug is on a magnetic conveyor, so it has no friction with the barrel whatsoever. So it's not igniting the air. You know, it's keeping the barrel clean. Yep, there's an elevator right up the middle. That's what this is. So it'll stop on every deck that has a little wedge. There's only 4 decks, but yeah, there's an elevator running up the middle. And there's also a secondary one here. So if I just turn on those a minute. Yeah, so there's a secondary one here just to go between two decks. Just for the sake of it, really. I mean, there's a stairwell there anyway, but yeah, just for the sake of it, we've also got another lift. And there'll be a cargo lift at the back. Oh, and this one, there's an engineering lift as well that goes up the engineering stairwell. So yeah, it's quite a few lifts actually. Yes, every ship will have a cold and dark tutorial. It's an interesting one because obviously eventually we want the tutorial to be like a campaign in its own right. So we want you starting off on the ground, on like an academy somewhere, and then as you progress through the tutorial, you're actually progressing off of the ground into space. You'll land on a ship, and then you'll be like, okay, so this is a real starship. Now we're going to do real things with it, and the tutorial will culminate with doing activities on a real ship. I guess we would use a smaller ship for that, so we might actually use the Caravella for that, to be honest, or something of a similar size. Yeah, we'll probably build a ship just for the tutorials. But yes, every ship will have a cold and dark startup procedure, and we'll probably have a tablet-based in-game version of that as well. So if the ship is in a cold and dark state, there will be a tablet-based checklist you can go through. So if you bring up the tablet and you choose cold and dark startup, then it'll do the same like breadcrumb trails on the screen, and walk you through a checklist rather than taking you through a tutorial specifically. So we'll probably have the full dialogue tutorial on the tutorial vessel, and then for every other ship we build, we'll do it by way of like in-game checklists. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it, because otherwise we're going to have to make a cold and dark tutorial for every single ship, which will just be a lot of wasted effort, really. Ultimately, it's going to be practically the same on every ship. The actions are like very similar actions on every vessel. The only difference is where that hardware is located. So as long as you've got a checklist and you know what you're doing next, and as long as it's giving you a breadcrumb trail on your HUD, then you should be good to go. Yeah, there is. If you look like between each deck, you can't see it quite so. You can see a bit of it here. So basically, the whole ship is built as a series of boxes. So you've got both lateral and horizontal support beams going all the way down. I haven't put them in yet for these bits, but the space between each deck is full of structural members. Where is that one? So here you can see it better. So along the whole length of the ship, you've got all these structural beams going through, and then you've got the lateral bracing beams as well. So the whole thing is just cubes and rectangles, wrapped in a bunch of engineering stuff. So hopefully that is a structurally sound design. But just like real world ships, it's built in blocks and then welded together. Yeah, I miss the old Miranda-esque Magellan, to be honest. I think I'm going to have to bring that shape back somewhere as a pre-FTL vessel, especially the toilet seat version. Like the disc one with a shopping trolley handle on it was kind of stupid looking, but the toilet seat / raindrop shaped one with the built-in engine nacelles, I thought looked quite cool. And the only reason we didn't end up using it in the end is because I just couldn't work out where to put the FTL ring in a way that looked good. So if we were to just do away with the FTL ring and make it a non-FTL vessel somewhere, I think it would be really cool. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if we could just take the ship and like bolt on a training FTL wheel, that could be interesting. Well, as we're almost at the end, let's just do I have the old version? I'm not sure that I do, to be honest. Let's just save that and have a quick look. Is it this one? Ah, yeah, it was this one. Yeah, so the old shape of the Magellan was this, and you know, it had, you know, nice cutouts for the RCS thrusters, and you know, overall it was a really nice shape. I don't know what layers we've got here. Let's just turn everything on. We clearly don't have everything, but yeah. So the original Magellan was going to be something like this. So it's got integrated engine nacelles which go into the main body of the hull. So the engine nacelles actually come up there and there, and it was just a really nice shape, and I really liked it. But there was just no practical way of putting an FTL ring around this ship in a way where it looks in any way decent, because it's already round, and you can't put a round thing around a round thing because it turns into a sphere. But yeah, if we can oh yeah, I've got loads of backups of all the old SketchUp files. So yeah, if I ever maybe in the future change the way the FTL rings work, then we could definitely come back to this shape as a future vessel, because I really like it. I think it's a really neat shape, and you know, it gives you a really big shuttle bay, and there's a bit of hull stuck in the way there, but you had a really nice shuttle bay, and that was all well laid out. And yeah, if we could just have like banana shaped FTL bits stuck on the side, I think that would work really well. And structurally, it was just such a nice design. But yeah, maybe one for the future. Yeah, I'm sure we'll have some alien races with sphere ships, but yeah, not the human race. See you, Delta. Have a good one, and good timing, because it's just gone midnight here in the UK. So I shall be heading off as well. So what are we on? Sunday, aren't we? So yeah, so the next stream will be on Wednesday, where we will be doing more on the Magellan, and then Friday, where we might start doing the planetary creation system, or we might do something else. We'll see how I feel on Friday. But yeah, have a good one, everyone, and I shall see you on the next stream. Bye for now.